All right, welcome everybody. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how to use Apex to be able to get more value from the device data that you already have so that you can start experimenting with IoT. Thank you all for coming. I know that it's the end of the conference, and it's great that you've been willing to sit down for a little bit, take a break, and spend some time with us. As always, we have to tell you to make purchasing decisions based on what's generally available. I don't think we're showing anything that hasn't been released, but just in case, make sure you always follow the guidance in this legalese. So who are we? I'm Michelle. This is Tim. We're product managers on Salesforce IoT. And we released a GA product, IoT Explorer, last Dreamforce, and we've been working since then to continue improving the customer experience and bringing you sessions like this that show you how to get even more value and start using it faster. So let's jump into what are we going to do. We're going to start by giving the briefest of brief overviews of IoT in case you haven't heard anything about it. And then we'll describe a scenario, one that's very common with a lot of our customers, of using gateways to be able to sort of package events from many small devices into one larger event. We'll walk through how to actually use Apex triggers to demux those events, that one big event, into multiple smaller events. And we'll briefly at the end give you some ideas to help you get started when you want to set this up yourself. Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so briefest of brief overviews of IoT. Salesforce IoT, what is it? It's not an IoT platform. Salesforce IoT actually helps you get value out of the device data that you have already collected. So if you want to partner with one of the partners we have, like AWS or Google Cloud Platform, perfect. But what we do is we really allow you to take that next step, take the device data, quickly iterate with various use cases, and provide value to your customers based on the data that you already have in Salesforce. So how does this work? Well, we take in platform events. That's a standard ingestion tool that we use. And then we couple those platform events with information that you already have in Salesforce, CRM data, perhaps service cases, accounts, anything you've already put together about your customers. And then you're able to write business rules against all of that information. And you can take outputs. Those outputs are going to be what actually creates the customer experience. Are you automatically creating cases when a device breaks? Are you automatically marketing to them whenever they're about to run out of a consumable that their device uses? And that's what we really enable you to do with IoT. But what we're going to focus on today, Tim, is just the platform event component of it. How can you take the devices that you have, maybe they're a little bit inflexible, right? A lot of devices, it's actually pretty hard to change the type of events that you're getting from them. How do you take that device data and turn it into something that allows you to quickly iterate, and as a developer, be able to sort of create almost little mini IoT microservices in a way that don't collide with each other? So we're going to dive into that. So the imaginary customer that we're talking about is called Burrow, and they are a home device company. They sell a gateway, which customers put in their home, and it sort of collects data from all the different devices, Burrow devices that are in the customer's home. So they make a bunch of these different things. You can have perhaps like 2 locks, one for the back door, one from the front door, a fridge, and a couple security cameras. But no matter how many of those devices you have, you only purchase one gateway that handles all of your subscription services, and make sure that the data gets safely into Salesforce or perhaps the IoT platform that is used for that data. So Tim was actually very involved in setting up the IoT Lego Village, if you guys have had a chance to take care of that. He actually had some experience with setting up a gateway for that use case. Do you want to talk about some of the advantages that the gateway had?
I would love to. And before I start, I think some of you may have missed the little pun that we put into this slide, so I'm going to call it out, which is that Burrow is a home for ground creatures. And so what is a home for creatures of the sky? That's the little pun that we've embedded in here. So anyways, let me come back off that tangent. So for those of you who have seen the IoT Village, which I hope is all of you, and if not, you must go see it before the end of today, because I put a lot of time into it, and so I want people to see it. You may have seen the customer demos as well, so you'll see a lot of those devices and a lot of those little buttons that the demo people are clicking. Those are actually sitting behind a Heroku gateway. And the reason is that at Salesforce, the world's #1 customer success platform, trust is one of our core values. And so we make it very hard for you to get apps authenticated with Salesforce. And what I mean by that is if you set up a connected app using OAuth, you've got to do the security the right way. You've got to get that client secret. You've got to get that token. You've got to get that callback URL. A lot of things, a lot of them I just left blank. But you might want to fill them out. And the point is that we want to make sure that the right people are sending the right data and making the right actions in your org. Now, the problem is that a lot of devices, especially those of the third industrial revolution, which is not the fourth industrial revolution that we are in right now, a lot of these devices are less sophisticated and cannot do this handling of OAuth tokens. And secondly, it creates a lot of bandwidth to take that handshake. And so what you can do is you can use a proxy gateway or a device IoT platform, such as AWS, to handle the authentication for you. And so what you have is you have all of your devices sending these sort of unauthenticated or less authenticated data into your IoT platform, which has a connector into a Salesforce org, using one of the partner connectors or using something. I did something sketchy for Lego Village because it was just a demo, but you might do something else. And you can just have it sit behind a gateway, and it just makes everything so much easier, and you don't have to worry about 4 hours in getting something that says handshake failed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of advantages to using any sort of gateway when you're setting up your IoT devices. Certainly, a lot of the devices, frankly, just don't have the capability to authenticate in a particularly secure way. Or if they do, as Tim mentioned, it's going to consume a lot of bandwidth. Another concern is just the battery consumption. So yes, if we're doing a connected fridge, the fridge is going to be plugged into a wall. But maybe like a lock, you don't want to sit around plugging your door into a wall. That seems weird. So that's going to be running off a long-living battery. We don't want to be drastically decreasing the life of that battery. So there's a lot of advantages to using these gateways. They also help maintain consistent user identities so that if I have all these different devices in the same household, they don't all need to know who they belong to, who they're registered to. And even if they are sold as an aftermarket sale to a new user, the registration information about what subscription is being used to service that device will come from the gateway rather than from some little piece of metadata that's on the device. And additionally, frankly, when you're transferring events, a lot of the stuff that you send is the same, right? Like who is sending it, maybe the ID of the device or the ID of the gateway. The data gets really repetitive. You don't need to have 10 different devices in a home sending the same events. It's so costly, especially if you're using mobile signals to do that. We have a lot of customers who do use devices at homes. Some of them might be slightly outside of a home. So you can think of a fuel tank situation where it can't be too close to the house. They're too far away to get Wi-Fi signals, so they have to use mobile signals. And this is a very common use case, right? The Wi-Fi signals are either unreliable or the devices are just slightly too far away. So a lot of our customers rely on mobile signals, and using gateways is one of the main ways that they're able to sort of decrease the consumption and do a lot more simpler transmissions of messages to the gateway, let the gateway do all the heavy lifting, and work as a real connectivity workhorse. So that's sort of the background on why this is an important thing to do in general. So let's jump into our specific users and what they'll do. There's a family called the Millers, and they are getting really excited about all the Burrow home technology. So they decided to start out with 3 devices. They bought a connected fridge, a connected lock, and a connected security camera. And Burrow went ahead and has IoT orchestration set up inside Salesforce. This is the brains of the operation that does all the interesting action. Burrow configured these orchestrations to monitor a couple different things. So Tim, why don't you go ahead and show us what these orchestrations look like at a high level and just explain to us what they do.
Oh, absolutely. So we're going to dive into the best product in Salesforce, which is Salesforce IoT. And what you can see here is that we have 3 different orchestrations. And they're a little contrived because this is a demo, right? But we have one that is basically monitoring the fridge sitting inside of your Burrow. And it's looking at possible food spoilage based on whether or not the fridge was unplugged or if temperature and humidity was bad. Another one is a lock. So this is a highly sophisticated lock that is powered by a battery. And so we want to make sure that when the battery is low, well, hopefully, when your battery is low, the door doesn't just unlock, but something happens. And finally, Burrow offers this super creepy camera, and so we want to make sure that the camera is constantly taking photos. Oh, security photos.
Security photos, or of a lot of these cameras are motion activated, so you basically just end up getting pictures of your pets all day. But you'll basically get a URL. So you notice that let's be honest, a connected lock that monitors the battery usage is kind of not a particularly exciting use case. Burrow got that feedback from their customers. I'm not really actually interested in this connected lock. All it does is it tells me in 3 years if the battery is dying, which is not really worth paying the $100 fee. So part of the reason that Burrow wants to be able to keep these orchestrations separate is so that without changing anything about the underlying device data, what the devices are sending in, they can do development separately. So they can say, wow, this lock product is absolutely failing in the market. We need to listen to our customers, hear what they want from their connected locks. We're hearing that they want to be able to do fingerprint authentication against the lock. So let's go ahead, implement that, get that IoT use case set up. They can push the changes to that orchestration without affecting any of the other orchestrations that they have running, as long as they don't change the device data. So that's Burrow's motivation in splitting this one large event up into 3 individual events that are consumed by separate IoT orchestrations. So let's go ahead and jump into how we actually do that. Sound good?
Yes.
All right, so in Apex, what we need to do is a couple steps. So we configured a couple things already. We'll show you really quickly. But we did create a platform event that represents that gateway event. And then we created 3 separate device events, one for the lock, one for the camera, and one for the fridge. There's also a little helper class that basically just makes the parsing a little bit easier to read. But that one's pretty straightforward. So let's go take a look at the events so we know what we're dealing with.
Right. So all of the events that come into Salesforce come in using something called the platform event. Shared service. It's the same way you get data into any other service at Salesforce that uses event-driven data. And so my 3 different orchestrations, I have one that's called fridge temperature, one that's called lock battery, and one that's called camera. And those are all expecting events that are specific to the device. So for example, for the camera, it's expecting the asset ID and the URL for the image. For something like the fridge, it's expecting the temperature and the asset ID. But the problem is that my fun event, which is the event that the Burrow sort of hub is sending in, it batches these 3 events together in a JSON, then it stringifies them and turns them into this thing, right? And that's the thing that's being sent in as a single event into an endpoint that is called the gateway event. And so my task is to take this gateway event, which is a text that contains a stringified JSON array. It takes that thing, that platform event, and it morphs it into 3 platform events that can then feed into IoT on platform.
And one thing that that does for the admins who are configuring an IoT is it makes it easier for them, right? They don't have to be worrying about like looking through the string for specific fields. They can just very easily go ahead and have a platform event that is readily accessible to them. So we want to do our job to make it as easy for the IoT users to sort of develop in an agile manner as we can. So let's see. I mean, we have those events shown. Now all we need to do is set up the trigger. So we're going to attach it to an event. We're going to go ahead and actually parse the different sub-events that are contained in the gateway event. And then we're going to emit those events. We're going to publish them back to the event bus. So let's go ahead and show how that works. So there's 2 places you can create the trigger from. You guys probably already know this. You can either do it in the platform event screen itself. You can see the list of triggers here. So we, of course, have a backup in case everything goes wrong. You can click New there and add a trigger. Or you can go into your trusty developer console. I like doing this because it does some autocomplete for you. And then you can go ahead and click New Trigger. And I don't know what we want to name it. Doesn't matter. And then you just attach it to that event. So when you do this attachment to a platform event, it's always going to autocomplete basically the opening part. So platform event triggers always happen after insert because that's when the platform event is actually available, has been like put into the database and can be consumed. All right, so what is the first thing that we actually need to do? We need to make sure that we handle getting a batch of events. This is our favorite part of writing Apex that we have to do every single time. So let's go ahead and make sure that we can handle looping over a batch of events rather than just a single event.
Just kidding. I don't actually know how to code. So I am going to steal code. Oh, it's a for loop. I know how to do that, but whatever.
It's always a lot better to do the copy-paste route instead of just having everyone fixated on typos for the duration of the talk. All right, so we got that loop in. Now what we want to do is actually create a parser. So we're just going to use an Apex class, and we're going to create a parser. And this is actually going to look into that complicated custom devices field for the various components that actually represent events.
Oh, I'm getting a call right now. So it turns out this is actually a very common just Java class called the JSON parser. So it will be in every org. Just kidding, I didn't get the call. Somebody told me this. earlier.
earlier today. All right, so what we actually want to do is we want to start looking through that complicated devices custom field and figure out what's in there. So let's check back at the event, Tim, the sample event that you have, and let's talk about what's actually in here. So we don't care about the subscription ID field, right? That's totally fine. We're only focused on processing this devices custom field. And if you look at it, you'll see that it is, yes, a string, but contained within that string as human beings, we can easily see that there is an array, and that array contains a number of objects. So the parser class has a couple different tokens. Some of them are for the start of an array. Some of them are for the start of an object. So that's what we're going to be looking for as we attempt to parse this particular event payload. You can, as you go work on this with any device data you have or any device data you create, if you have different structures such as arrays contained within object fields, you can look through that and sort of build what you would like to do. All right, so the first thing that we need to look for, it looks like, is the beginning of an array. So let's go ahead and put in the code that allows us to find the token that represents the start of an array. So we're always going to be looking for the next token, and you always want to just continue the loop until you run out of things to actually parse. So let's go ahead and put this in, and then we'll explain it once we get it in. Thank you. OK, so what we want to do here is basically go through and look for the start of the array, which is that open bracket, the square bracket, right? And as long as there's still tokens that are continuing in there, we are going to look for the start of the curly brace, right? So we're going to look for each of these curly brace objects. There's 3 of them in the sample event that we've provided, and that's what we're really looking into. Within those sets of curly braces is the event that we're going to create that represents one particular device in the home gateway. Sound good?
Yes.
Question.
Yes. Is this start object or tart object?
That is definitely
like a sour object.
It is definitely the start of an object.
OK.
But that is always a good question to verify that we're not sneaking food puns in. OK,
Sorry,
and we forgot this line.
Yeah. Crap.
So we're going to stick one more line in to make sure we're actually going through. And that's just right after the JSON parser.
Yes, we need to make sure that we terminate.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right, so we got that guy in, and that's just looking for all the tokens. Now what we're going to add at the end is we're going to look first for the lock event, I believe.
Lock event.
OK. So let's go down here and copy paste all the data that's going to give us information about the lock event. So what we're looking for, again, there's just a little helper class, and it basically just takes everything that's in the array and just makes it accessible as attributes of a class. And what we're looking is whether there is something called a thing type. So each of these little sub-events says, I belong to the fridge, or I belong to the lock, or I belong to the camera. So we're going to go ahead and look for that specific type of device. And then what we use that for is to determine which field assignments to make. So remember that each use case is a little different. The lock is monitoring battery level, the fridge is monitoring temperature, and the camera has an image URL. So we want to make sure that we do the correct field assignments when we create our platform events. The lock, we've made sure that we add in that particular battery level into the event. And then the final thing we need to do is publish the event. So we use event_bus.publish, and we just provide it the variable that represents that new platform event instance that we have created. All right. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's just go ahead and copy paste the rest of it for the other 2 devices now. And we can just go ahead and get it running, and hopefully everything will work out good, and our copy pasting skills were on point.
Oh right. My, we're short on time. I see why.
The final thing that we need to do is just skip over any of the children. So we don't really care if there's like end object tokens or end array. We're not processing those at all. We don't need to do anything special. If you had a lot of nesting, you might care about doing that. Or if you had variable length objects, you might care about doing that. But for us, we don't need to do that. OK, so let's see if this saves successfully. All right, it looks good. So we can refresh this, the home gateway event page, and verify that we now have the new trigger added. It looks like it's there and it's active. OK, so now all we want to do is send in one of these home gateway events. And then we want to verify. Tim is showing us that there are currently 0 instances in each of these 3 orchestrations. If we are successful, when we send in a home gateway event, we will have 1 fridge instance, 1 lock instance, and 1 camera instance, because our event contains 1 event about a camera, 1 event about a lock, and 1 event about a fridge. So let's go ahead, and we're just using Workbench to do this. If you're curious at all about how to set up IoT, feel free to look up any talks from Trailhead DX when they get posted on YouTube. There's also a number of Dreamforce talks from last Dreamforce that walk through how to do all the setup. We have one called Zero to IoT Trailblazing Hero in 40 minutes. So the Dreamforce version of that is up already, and I'm sure the Trailhead DX one will be up soonish. So it looks like we were successful. We were able to send these events in. And now we basically have 3 orchestrations that are independently consuming events, and we can change those, right? We can change the orchestrations we can change the lock orchestration, make it do something a little bit more interesting than just monitor battery life without worrying about whether the camera orchestration is going to run into any issues. So let's just close off with some ideas about how you could possibly use this. We have a lot of customers who are interested in doing more complex calculations, calculating the rate of change over the time. You probably care about whether the fridge temperature is going up very, very rapidly, right? We also have a lot of customers who do geolocation use cases. They might have beacons rather than static gateways. So if you're a large hotel customer, for instance, you might care about which amenities customers are taking advantage of. And you want to see when they're sort of checking in each area, maybe offer them a coupon if they're over at the cafe, or give them a half-off drink coupon if they're at the bar. And finally, you can always use these on IoT outputs, too. You can send platform events or create any object, attach an Apex trigger, and post messages in Slack if you're monitoring an internal system, or send text messages via live message, or just make calls to external systems. So there's a ton of options here. All right, so that's all the time we have. We'll stick around to answer questions. Thank you for stopping by, and hope you enjoy the rest of Trailhead DX.
Wow, that